Looking for it to link back up. See when we go live. I'm sorry. I think I had a pretty bad technical issue tonight that stopped me from getting on. It looks like I'm back on the YouTube. Let's check out Facebook. I don't see it on the Facebooks. Okay, we are good. We're all good on Facebook. See John Clint watching. Connect watching. Sorry, John. I didn't mean to mispronounce your name there. Looks like we pop back on Mob Crush if anybody watches there, and let's go check Twitch. Yep, okay, we are live over on Twitch. Awesome. Awesome. Say hi in the chat if you're hearing me and finally seeing me after the technical glitches we had. I had a network failure that happened and I had to restart everything, and then all the network connections that I used dropped, so the stream dropped, of course, and all my Dante audio dropped and everything, but we're still rolling tonight. About 5 minutes in, just because of the technical error. We'll give people a few minutes here till I see some stuff popping in on the chat. Say hi. Hope everybody's still staying safe with all the craziness that's been going on in our world. And if you're out there in some of the cities that are that are reeling with some of the consequences of what's happened this week, I hope you're staying safe and doing what you can to take action, hopefully without violence. But we understand that pain is a thing, and people feel it even if we don't understand it. So I'll leave it there. Just giving it a minute for people to pop in. I think all the tweets went out. I'm not entirely sure, but I'll just double check. Okay, yeah, it looks like maybe the tweet didn't go out yet, but it will. People will pop in. Cool. Yeah, so if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or Twitch, say hi in the chat. Give it a couple more minutes here to recover from the drop stream and let people know that we're on and get in. Move this over. I gotta just move my chat window over a little bit. It's on my iPad, so it's a thing. Move that over so it doesn't fall. Get rid of these papers on my desk, which I no longer need. Keep everything clean here. Get a sip of coffee, because coffee's always good before you start working on audio. Oh, that's such good coffee. I'm drinking, still drinking the Nespresso. I haven't pulled in anything fancy yet, but is what it is. Okay, I'm not sure if the chat is working. I'm going to go run over to one of the other social platforms real quick here. I may actually just pull this down and try to refresh this chat on my own. I'm just afraid I'm missing people. Facebook. Hey John, if you're still watching over on Facebook, could you let me know and say hi, just so that I know what's going on there? Anybody out there? Anybody out there? I am actually really excited to be back on tonight. It's been a minute. I've had my anniversary happened this weekend, and sorry, this week. It was on Wednesday. I hope that the recording that I was playing from 2015 from the AVL Expo was helpful. It was a Mixing 201 talk that I gave for that. I hope that helped you out. It was best I could find. I was searching quite a bit. I thought I had a drum mic video that I wanted to run, but apparently it's been lost in the years of travel. So I'm going to try to shoot a new one of those as soon as I get the opportunity. So I'll try to get that nailed down as quick as I can, because I know that'll help people. Tonight we've got a couple questions in from Instagram and stuff, so we're gonna start heading in that direction. So I'm just gonna flip over to turn on the audio for the mix rig, sorry, and I'll flip over to transition to that. Kill studio mode here, and we'll go ahead and kill Spotify so we can hear our mix rig. I'm flip over. I'm preparing to move. I got a new position out in the Alabama area of the country. So I am, sorry, that sounded terrible. So I am preparing to move, so I'm not looking to put a lot of effort into this particular space until I get out there. So I still need another screen at some point, so I'll just deal with the flipping between it. But let's check our audio level here, make sure we're not going to blow everybody's ears out, especially mine, because I've got the in-ears going. This is my level adjustment here. Okay, that seems pretty good there. Let me know how it is on the platforms, how this level is for this music. I'll run a little bit while I kind of get myself situated here. It's probably a little quiet, I'm imagining. So kick it up a little. So let me know how that is. I'll sit it there for now. Right about, give it a, yeah, there we go, somewhere in there. Hopefully that's good. And let's go ahead and let's pull up the Instagram questions from the post today. There was a few. Let's see here. We got a question from Josiah. We got a question from Timothy. I am not sure how to pronounce your name. I'm sorry. I gotta see. Can I get over to your profile? I probably can't easily. But gain staging with wireless mics. I'll go over that at the end because I obviously don't have a wireless mic here to talk about with you, so or show you. So I'll just talk about it at the end of this stream. Timothy's asking, any chance that we could see more on the Chris Lord Algae compressor plugins, 76s, getting the best use out of them? Yeah, we can cover that, and we'll start with Josiah's question. Josiah is asking, cut snare bleed from tom mics without ruining the transient, also using trigger 2. Yes, we can go over that. First things first, I'm going to switch sessions here real quick, because this session is not a good session to use to show you the snare bleed on the toms, because there is none. I've already edited all this out, so I'll go over another session real quick. Go ahead and close this session, and we'll save it, and we'll open up another session that has some more better stuff. Let's go with what's the one we used? Was it this one? Yeah, let's open this one. So this is a live album in its raw form, I believe. So I will be able to show you simply mic captures like from straight off the night, no editing, no nothing. This was an example I was showing when I was using the session before, so we'll ignore that. Let's see here. Here's some toms, and what you'll see is when the tom gets hit, like over here, you can see some obvious transient, and then when the snare is being hit, you can see some subtle transient. So let's go ahead and play this and make sure it doesn't blow our ears out. Okay, not bad. Not bad. not too loud. So we'll go ahead and we'll take these two tom mics that we have and we'll color them so we can know what we're dealing with on the stream. Hopefully that doesn't look too ugly. We will go ahead and we'll make these a little bit bigger so we can see what we're dealing with. And I'll go ahead and bring this up. Oh, I keep hitting the wrong button. Okay, and then we'll just bring this one up too. Okay, and just for the purposes of the fact that this was not, we did not mix this, let's just do a quick check on the mix of these toms. Okay, so we'll do that, and we know that that tom is sitting over here somewhere, so we'll pan it. Also, it's a little hot for my taste, so I'll bring it down. Actually, we'll make sure that yes, we are on 14. I'm going to flip over to the mix window so that I can see the meter a little clearer, because that's how I like to work. Cool. So I'm bringing the volume up with the fader until I can hear it with the overhead, but not overpowering the overhead, and then I'll check the polarity. Okay, I'm feeling like it's a little bit better when it's out of polarity, just like the other tom was. We'll bring it back up in volume. It's looking like its gain is about where I want it. This one's tricky. I'm going to go have a little visual look real quick just to verify that I feel like I'm hearing the correct thing or not. So I'm going to go check this tom hit against this. Yes, they are out of time. That's the distance between them. And it looks like what I'm struggling with here is not perfectly... That alignment's really driving me nuts. So it's kind of sounding good both ways. I'll just take this long hit here, this long roll here, and I'll use that to really work it out. Hopefully I can hear a difference. Okay. Okay, it is a little bit better when it's in. So sometimes you just need to double check some stuff. And that's quite all right. But the other thing is we didn't put in our... Okay, now we'll check that polarity one last time. Okay, so it still didn't, the phase flip above that knee didn't affect us too much. Okay, let's get closer in. We'll undo what I just accidentally did. And I keep doing it. Fat fingers. Cool. Just cleaning up the overall mid-range in that to get some definition out of it. Okay, and we'll check the polarity one last time. Okay, do you notice what's happening? So as soon as I move this up, because that knee is closer to where that tom is ringing, my polarity has changed, so I can't just set it, forget it, and then move my filters around, and it'll be fine. I need to try to figure out what I want that filter to do before I check my polarity. So kind of bit myself in the rear end there a little bit, but that's okay. So let's talk about the snare bleed. Okay. This is a pretty good section to listen to because we do have a whole groove. So if I listen to just like, say, this snare. Okay. So you have some snare bleed in there. Now there's a couple of things that we can do. Let's imagine that we don't want to compress this tom, and it's a pretty good performance. So if this drummer was a little more dynamic, maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I would not want to do this trick because I would want to compress the tom, or maybe I wanted a more aggressive sound on it, so I would want to compress it. But if I'm working with a console and all I have is this channel strip, it's built into the console, this is an option I could do. So this is quick and dirty. You should be able to do this on most consoles unless your channels are so far apart that you don't have the ability to. Some consoles will have only the ability to sidechain within a certain bank 8, and that has to do with how the FPGA or the actual processor for the audio engine is constructed. So when you see a console like a Yamaha console that will only let you sidechain within a bank of 8 inputs, that's why. It's not because Yamaha was just like, oh, we're going to limit you and make you work harder. It's just the architecture they decided on to use for the actual processing engine. That's how it works. I apologize. Let me get some water. Gotta keep my vocal cords. I don't want to say moist. Everybody hates that word. That's better. That's better. Okay, so what you could do if you have the ability to sidechain and they're close enough to each other is we could use a compressor actually to duck out the snare. Now, before I go too far with this, if you ever have a tom being hit with the snare, you need to be careful with doing this. And if you have songs, this is where knowing your song comes in. Or the material you're mixing. If you know that you have a lot of songs where the toms are being hit simultaneously with the snare, this is not a trick you want to use, but it's a trick if you don't have a lot of the fancier tools. So I'll show you this, and then we will show you some other stuff. So we know that there is a couple snare hits here, and I'll go ahead and just go from go all the way up to this beat there. Sorry, I promise that's not the evil disease. So we'll play this loop. Cool. So that should give us a good example. We will take the in Pro Tools. This is what you have to do. You have to use a bus, but in some consoles, all you do is pick the input. So we'll go take a bus. Bus 23 looks good. We'll make it pre-fader so that it doesn't change on us. Put it at Unity. We don't care about the pan or any of the other stuff. We will go up to this channel strip that we're using for this tom, which is actually this one. And we will put in our compressor. And we'll go over to the sidechain. And we'll key it. So this is what a key. We're going to use an external key to open this door or to make this door shut. That's what that means. So our key input in Pro Tools is up here for the plugins. On all plugin windows, it'll be up here. So what do we want our key to be? We want that bus 23 that we just used. Yep. And we'll use the peak detection on this. This is just how this particular plugin works. Peak detection means it's going to be detecting, it's going to use the peak for the detection rather than the average for this key input. And if it was internal, you could do it that way too. So if you wanted it to act on the average, you could, or if you wanted to act on peaks. So peaks are good for drums usually. Average is usually better for, synths and things like that have more elongated waveforms. We don't care about the filters because we actually just want the whole snare hit. And then we might start somewhere around 6 or 7, and we'll try to have that attack pretty quick. and we're really only going to worry about 100. Well, we'll start around 100 milliseconds. Okay. We do want a hard knee. And we'll bring it down until we're getting rid of that. Okay, so you see that? Without it. Remember that we're listening just to this tom. Okay, so what's happening here is every time that snare hits, it's getting routed over to this plugin via the key input, and we're using a peak detection to trigger this compressor to slam down on the tom, which is not playing because it's just the bleed, and we're getting rid of the extra snare information in that track. Okay, so a pretty cool way to do it. You could make more compound versions of this if you wanted to kick in the snare bleed out of it, but again, you're running that risk of compressing the tom when you don't want to. The reverse way you could probably do this is, will this actually let me do it this way? This won't let me flip this. Okay, well, it's not gonna let me flip. It's not gonna, I won't explain what I can't show you. So if you don't want to go this way, you want to go one step better. The next step better is to use just your standard expander compressor. Now we have this side chain happening, so we need to flip back to internal because we want the gate. Sorry, I'm probably talking in circles. We want this gate then or expander that we're starting to use the actual internal signal, the signal that is from the tom. So we don't need this key. We'll turn this guy on. Now, if we're talking about a tom, we do maybe want to look at this filter on our sidechain if we have it, because this filter, the tom's going to have some information in the low end that we may not need hitting that expander circuit or that gate circuit. Like let's say there's a low rumble or something nearby bass cabinet, or the other tom or the kick drum is coming in bleeding and it's opening the gate for this particular tom way too much, so we could filter some of that out. So I would tend to go somewhere between 120 and 200 on these when I'm trying to do this. So for this one we'll go around 100, maybe a little lower, and then we'll turn this gate on, and we should be able to start dialing this in to get rid of everything but the tom. So this gate is going to stay shut until the tom walks up to it and wants to come through. This one has a ratio. A lot of consoles and stuff do not have a ratio for their gates and their expanders, which is totally fine. If you go all the way up, a gate is a hard close. Anything below a hard close is an expander, which means it will push the signal down, but a hard close will shut it off completely. So we're going to start with that so I can show you some things. We don't want any hold, so we'll bring that down as quick as possible for this example. We want the attack to be as fast as possible for this example, and we're going to stay up around 300 milliseconds for the release. And of course, again, the depth is going to be, there's no depth for this because the gate shuts all the way off. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to raise this threshold. Okay, so now we can dial this in a little bit. Sorry for the background noise. So you can see that we have to go real high on this release up to 10. Sorry, I'll stop wiggling that 10-second mark for it to start to sound like a tom. So that's one way to do it. And then if we have this hold long enough to accompany to let through the whole tom. Okay, that's one way to do it. Now another, you could take this depth. I don't think it's going to work. Oh yes, it does. So what I would do in a live situation is I wouldn't go all the way sterile, what I call sterile, where there's no bleed, because that can become pretty obvious, especially if the drummer's going to play some like rolling groove or something like that, and that little bits are going to come through. So you're going to want some room, some margin in there, some leniency on this gate. You want this gate to not close all the way. And we know that 6 dB is roundabout an audible doubling or halving, so we're going to sit in that range. Okay, or multiples of. Okay, so I'll show you without it. Okay, so that's one way. Another way is to flip it into a little gentler, again, so make it an expander instead of a gate. Okay, so it acts like a compressor in reverse. Okay, you can see that the numbers that are changing are on the right side, not the left side. So instead of it being 3 to 1, it's 1 to 3, because it's working in the opposite direction. You can go, I would go maybe down to, we'll go to 12, because it's usually a number that I use for this. And the threshold, the ratio just depends on where you like to hear it. Now on this particular one, I usually wind up high anyway. But let's show you something a little bit more natural. So let's say that this is maybe not as natural as you want it. Let's start emulating the window on the tom, right? So somewhere around a 50 to 100 milliseconds on the hold to let the hit come through fully, and then the release. Okay. Without it. With it. Okay, so that's two examples, gate and gate and expander. So, and now on the more advanced consoles, you'll have two dynamic sections where you'll have the ability to have a gate and a compressor. Always gate before your compressor, because if you switch that up, then you're going to be increasing your noise floor, and the gate's not going to operate the way that you want it to. Now, let's take this another step further. Now, I believe I have this. If I don't, I don't. Okay, so hold on. I need to switch back to the other session. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Save as. Today is the 29th. Okay. And that same, all that process applies to all toms that you would have too. But we'll go ahead and open recent. We'll go to the other one. Okay, so this session has something that the first session does not have. I know that these toms are already cleaned up by editing, and I'll show that as a last resort. But what this session has, if you would imagine that there's still a bunch of bleed here, this session has some triggers that I recorded. So drum triggers are available from pretty much any music supplier, and there are good ones out there. D-drum, the high-end D-drum ones are very nice. There's other ones that you can get too. But what they are is they're little piezo contacts that sit on top of the drum. Now, if I look at this kick drum, right, it has some nice waveform to it. But if I go and I look at the trigger for that, what you're going to see is basically one single impulse. Now, I'm not going to play that sound for you because it sounds horrible. But look at where the snare is, right? There's absolutely no snare bleed in any of the other tracks because these are contact pickups. These aren't microphones. Now, if your drummer's bashing like crazy, sometimes they will vibrate just a tiny little bit, but it's so small that it doesn't really matter. So what you can do with this is get a very discrete impulse that you can use, right? Tiny impulse that you can use to open up those gates and then later I'll talk about trigger. But you can use these triggers, ironically, same name, I know, there's a reason for it, to open up gates and stuff for your channel strips for your tom. So this is the tom we have. Okay, and we have this guy here, this tom. What do we listen to? So we have bus. We'll bust this guy out to one of those free outputs. I'll use 29 in this case because it's open, and it's already saved, and it always will make noise, and its volume is already up. Okay, so we'll go to this channel strip. We'll pick up bus 29 for the key. We will go over to the sidechain. We will pick up an external key. We're going to want peak, and we're going to, yep, we've already set that. This is one area where you might want to use that filter, so I will actually show you this sound, even though it is terrible. So our digital output, and I will bring it down because it is horrible. But this is what that sounds like. Okay. Okay. So what you might want to look over here on this, on the analyzer over here, and you can see what frequencies. This is pretty broadband on this one. On the kick, which I really don't want to. I'll mute that one. And I'll turn it down because this one's louder. Okay, you can see how that kick is shorter impulse, and it's higher in frequency. Well, when you have the toms, because of how loose particularly this one tom is, you can that pickup will warble, will just kind of vibrate a little around with that head being so loose, so you get some low frequency information. So we may want to cut some of that out in this one instance. So when you see me do that, in contrast to what I did in the last section, that is why, because I already know what that particular one sounds like. Okay, so we'll loop that section there, and we'll listen to the tom 2. We already have our bus set to 29. We already have it peak detecting, and we're gonna pull out some of that low frequency garbage. Okay, now when I go ahead and I turn on this gate, by the way, in this particular plugin, this sidechain will actually operate both on the compressor and the expander, but I'm not too worried about that because that impulse is contacting the head. It is actually going to arrive, unless this one has been edited to be, but it nailed right on time. But basically what will happen is, okay, so this one's been edited and lined up a little bit more, but when you look at this in raw, because it's directly contacted and it's running effectively at the speed of light down the wire, it arrives faster than the sound pressure does to the microphone. So even the settings that I'm going to use for the compressor, if I did it on the mic and then switch to the trigger, not worried about it. They're going to operate very, very similar. So I'm going to turn that off for a minute, and I'll turn up the volume just so we can hear. So I know there's no snare here, but basically imagine if there was a snare, what would be happening when I work on this. So we're in the expander. We're going to go fully up to gate, and we're going to go down. We're going to use our extreme measures again. So we're going to go all the way on everything. So you can see, follow what you're hearing with the waveform that you're seeing down here. Obviously, all we're hearing is the hit. So if we dial this in, okay. So I'm just going to check because I'm right here in Pro Tools. I can do this live. I wouldn't be able to do this, but I would have to have it kind of memorized. So about 100. So anywhere from 42 to 60. So we know that our hold can be somewhere up there. We can even double 40 if we want to, just to play it safe. and we can make sure that our dial in our release. And because there's no other bleed in this particular track, but we're only using that trigger, we could switch to an expander too. So you can see, look at the analyzer, what the analyzer in this the processor's doing. You can see when the other drums are hitting that's still falling way down because it's not being hit. There's no mechanical movement happening for that piezo pickup to pick up. So you can be quite a bit more liberal and not so stringent with this. Okay, awesome technique. So what you would need to do this is those D drum pickups for maybe kick, snare, and all the toms you have. So you need additional preamps. In this case, we had 4. We have 4 additional channels chewed up on our console just to do this. All right. So I want you to imagine for a second. In this case, with only 2 toms in the setup, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, let's go view. Edit window shows track number. Okay. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. We are at 14, 15. We're at 15 input channels before we even have our click accounted for or our talkback for this drummer. So you're talking almost half an X32 to do this drum setup. So this is obviously only something you would invest in if you had the room to do it. Josiah, who's asking me about this, probably does in most of his venues. I know he's got a Pro X in at least a couple of them, or at least one of them. I don't know what's changed since I've last been there, but that's what you would do. But this trigger is also, you would never listen to this. You'd never want to put this in the PA, but you would route them around to what you need to do. Another thing that this buys you the opportunity to do is you can run this trigger directly into, let's put it on, let's go ahead and do this. We'll mult this out here. Okay, so we're going out both this digital output and this bus. We can take this and put, where does it sit? It sits in harmonic. Nope, it sits somewhere strange. Dynamics. Yep, there it is. I'm going to go ahead and use mono. You could use stereo if you want to, but again, that's just more processing power, more buses chewed up. Or buses for audio to route around the console. So this is trigger 2. I'm working with a second tom, which is a pretty low tom in frequency. So we can start listening to this now. And obviously we don't hear anything because we haven't loaded up a sample. Okay, so in trigger 2, you'd go to the browser. And you would settings, if you are opening this for the first time after it's installed, you would have a bunch of samples that you would have downloaded and put them on a hard drive, preferably an SSD or something fast. And then you would use this button here, select base directory, and you would go map it to wherever you've unzipped all those trigger instruments. And that's how they would show up here. So we're wanting toms, right? Let's just start with Birch Tom 2, right? Just this one. When you have this Audition in browser enabled by default on, you can do that. You can listen to them, right? So Slate will give you some, it's a little bit loud, so I'll turn it down. But Slate will give you a couple for each particular drum that he sampled. He'll give you quite a few things that you could load in. Now, what these are is different microphones that you would load. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and drop these in. I don't do this normally. I find the cleanest one and I mix it with the, so I would just use this one, right? And that's all I would use, and I would mix it with the existing one. This particular tom is too high, because if we listen to, oopsie, sorry, and I need to turn off this key for a second. No, I got to do something else. No key, sidechain. Yeah, that's all fine. We'll do peak. Oh, I did the wrong. That was fat fingered. There we go. So you hear how low that tom is? So I don't know that I would be using that. So I would keep that in mind, right? So I'm going to go, maybe I'll move on. These metal toms are going to be hella crazy. We can keep going on. It's totally subjective. It's totally up to what you think is good. Well, let's maybe just do this one. Here. Okay. So normally, like I said, I would use one. Whichever one is the cleaner one. So probably should have just flipped that around just to keep my brain straight. Cool. And you notice every time I click on around, it's making noise. That's fine. That doesn't bother me. It might bother you, but so what you would do is just like you would with any other drums, you'd want to make sure you do a couple things. First, you want to tune this, right? So we have this here, right? I'll mute this one for a second. And we're only picking up a little. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. We're going to bring this detail knob down so that we hit that trigger real well. And then what we'll do is we'll do flip that. Hard is sort of what the algorithm is going to do in choosing the sample based on the input. So we want a little bit more aggressive to hear this. And then we know that the tuning is just too high. So, okay, so we could take that tune knob and we can try to start matching the pitch of this tom. Okay, so there's definitely probably a better sample to pick, but I'm just using this as an example. So what you'll also notice is I'm missing some of those triggers, right? Even though it looks like this threshold line is crossing some of them, I know there's another one there I have to pick up. There's definitely one there I'm missing. You know, there's a few there I'm missing. Instead of rocking this all the way down, I need to start looking at things like my sensitivity. Okay, so I'll turn this up. Once I know I'm crossing the threshold line on all the hits that I need, which I know I'm missing one still, I'm going to start bringing the sensitivity up so that I hit all of those transients. And then we can also low cut some of the garbage out. And we might want to bring up the volume a little bit, just coming into it. Okay, starting to sound more like what the tom is actually doing. And the other thing is this re-trigger here. This is going to help us control flams, right? So as I turn this up, you'll see the red appear beyond the transient hit. Okay, so you would do this when if you're getting a lot of double triggers and you don't want those, you would make sure that it doesn't trigger within a certain number of milliseconds after it triggers, right? It's almost like, hey, for 52 milliseconds after you play a sample, don't trigger again, right? And if you have flam hits and you're looking at it in Pro Tools or another DAW, you can go calculate exactly what that distance is between a typical flam and set around that value or just under that value, so that you can really dial this in, right? So there's that. And because we're around about 25, I'm going to make sure that we go 25 on all of them. Now, I believe I guess you can't do it here. I thought there was a way to group these, but I could be wrong. But we're going to start around the same for all of these. The next thing you would do, and this is probably not going to work because this is not at all the same sounding type. You can find one that sounds much closer, but so what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to bring this down. Okay, so it's right there, and I'm going to flip the polarity. Okay, so it sounds pretty good when it's in polarity. This is important. This time it sounds pretty good this way, but sometimes it's very obvious that one sounds better than the other. What you would do now if you were using these multiple samples, you would start maybe dialing in that phasing, that kind of flangey sound you heard was me changing the volume while it was playing samples. Oh, it could also be because of the tuning. Oh, here we go. Let's do this. Hard. Cool. So you could do that. I would usually just use the one and blend it in. And we didn't even use the actual drum for that. Now, if we had used the actual drum for that, I will show you how much harder that becomes. Oops, I don't want to listen to that garbage. And I'm going to want to make sure that this is turned right the way down, back to 0. And I'm going to start with this down a little bit because I don't know how loud this is going to come through that. Okay. Okay, so we can obviously see that we might need to come up a little bit. Can you also see what's happening with that, the differences in dynamics there? Okay. 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 Okay, so we're hitting them all. This actually turned out pretty good. That's not normally like that. You see these other ones that are crossing that threshold? Quite often those will start to trigger and they're not actually hits. But this one actually came up pretty good. So if we keep playing. Yep. Yep. Oh, you hear that? Right there. Okay. Okay, so we know that we gotta probably start by turning this up a bit. Okay. Oh crap, see what happened there? So now we're having a problem where we brought this detail up and we should be losing hits, but it's now interpreting them different. Okay, let's go up a little bit more. Okay, oh, we just squeaked by. Oh no, did we just lose one? Oh, see, but now we got to come back down again. So you can see how frustrating this is. So, okay, so now that's good. Now we go back over here. Oh crap. So now we turn this down. Oh no. No, no, no. No. I will tell you this right now. You can dial this in. And it will be fine. You just gotta spend a lot more time playing with it. But you can see I'm still not at a place where I'm happy, even though I thought I was. But this is what you got to do. You got to check when you're using that microphone and start looking at everything. With that trigger, because it's so clean, I get to a result much faster. Now, I should have saved that before I did it, but I think I remember what the numbers were. I'm going to go back up to the trigger with that plugin. and I'm going to unmute this. Now, I believe I was somewhere in this ballpark of 9. This is fine. Bring volume down. I think I was at like there and somewhere around here, but we'll see. Okay. Now look at that. It's immediately a lot better. That's all we want, right? And that would have been a lot more crazy once we got to that section if we were using the microphone. But let's look at one last thing with trigger. Curves. All right, so what we're going to want to do, especially if you're using multi-mics, is we're going to want to link all these things. Okay? And if you wanted to unlink them and dial into them different because you mixed and you matched or whatever, you totally do whatever you want. Do whatever sounds good to you. But what I'm going to do is for this type of a thing, I don't want all those really tiny hits and all those really loud hits. This isn't really jazz. This isn't really classical or one of those more dynamic. It's rock worship type genre, right? So we're going to limit our range. We're not going to be using a lot of these real tiny hits. We're going to exaggerate our velocity curve so it gets harder faster, and we're going to reduce our dynamic range. Okay. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to block this down 1 click. So these are MIDI values. So from 0 to 128 or 127. I'm going to come down 1 because I find that that 127 is just too hard. They map the maximum sample that they take, the maximum velocity sample, and it's always just a little too aggressive for me. So pretty much 95% of the ones that I've tried, I've wound up doing this. So I just do it by default. It doesn't bother me. I don't really need that last one. But what you're going to hear now when I play this is you're going to hear a lot more aggressive and consistent samples. Okay. And if you don't like how much that we've limited it down, you can always increase it back. Okay. But this is going to give you a much more consistent drum performance. But it's going to remove feeling. So the more you do this, the more feeling you're going to remove. You don't have all that beautiful articulation. So there's a trade-off to everything, right? And again, I am not a fan of running all of these for the reasons that we're hearing. Okay, so I'll run a clean one and I'll mix that in with my live drums if I'm doing this. Very often I don't do this. Now the same rules apply for the snare. You're just going to have more complexity there because we do a lot more flamming on the snare and things like that. So Josiah, I hope that was helpful. That was going through cleaning up a lot of things and using trigger. So I'm going to go look at the next question. If anybody has any questions about any of that, go ahead and post them in the chat in the comments right now. But I'm going to go ahead and look at more questions while I wait for any questions on that. So we're looking at, okay, so the 76. I want to see the 1176. Got you. All right, so let's do that. Okay, so I'm not going to be using that anymore tonight unless we get questions about it, so I'm going to shut that off. So an 1176 is a